what's up, friends and fam? My name's Cameron, and I got something very, very new for you. So let me guess, you're probably a leader, an influencer, some young adult that wants to start something, or you're a part of something that requires you to be growing constantly. Well, I got good news for you. One, you're not alone, and two, I can actually help you. Welcome to Free Game. In this unique niche series, we're going to be talking about some principles and some practicals to help you with your everyday leadership. One of my favorite principles I want to go over with you guys is called EQ. Now, EQ stands for emotional intelligence. There's two facets of this. Like, you have your EQ that you will use to understand the world around you, and your EQ so that you can better understand the world within you. Today, we're going to be focusing on understanding the world around you. Now, this is important because it helps you understand how people feel about you and how they experience you. The reason why we as leaders have to be aware of this is because we need to know how to adapt and change so that we can better communicate to the people around us. If a person is not feeling comfortable with us, we need to be aware of this, and we need to develop the skill to be able to pinpoint it, highlight it, and understand it. So I got a couple of ideas I want to share with you, okay? It's very, very simple. Three super simple practicals. We have body language, we have street smarts, and we have spiritual awareness. I'm going to take a moment to break down all three of these concepts, all right? So the first one, we got body language. And body language is how people respond physically. If you ever look at a person and you're wondering if they're actually understanding you or they're hearing you, chances are their body language is going to tell you more about how they're receiving your idea or what you're presenting more than their words. In fact, studies tell us that people communicate with 70% of their facial expressions, and only the rest of the percentage is with what they say. So this is important. When we are learning to read body language, we're checking for comfort and discomfort, especially if you're talking to a group of people or you're having a one-on-one with a person. You want to know how comfortable they are with you. And when you're checking for these things, it's very, very slight. You're not looking for the big gives, but you're looking for the more slight gives. There's been multiple times I found myself speaking in a room full of people, and I've had to really just check the body language of individuals. This helps me understand if they're receiving what I'm giving based off their body language. And it tells me if I need to adapt, change, or if I need to continue with the train of thought or the way that I'm presenting it. Body language speaks so loud. Most of the time, people are not good communicators, not because they don't know what they're talking about, but mostly because they can't read how other people are responding to what they're talking about. Body language is everything. It's the way we think, the way we talk. It's the way a person sits in a chair. It's the way that a person responds. It's the little small little moments they have in the corner of their mouth when they're trying to crack a smile or they're trying to prevent a smile. Those things are all clues and they're highlights. Now, I have to be honest for you. You're not going to get body language correct all the time. For those of you who are probably in relationships, you probably know that there's moments where you really, 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 really think you know what's going on in your spouse's mind based off their body language, only to find out that you got it wrong. See, body language is an art that you'll have to perfect. It takes a lot of trial and error. You're going to have to spend lots of time trying to read people accurately. Do yourself this. If you take a moment and you try to test yourself, just pause and look at the rooms that you're surrounded by. Anytime I'm out in public or if I'm waiting while my wife shoe shops, I just sit on a bench and I just look at the people around me. I look at what they're saying, what they're doing. But the most important thing is that I love to look at the conversations that are happening. If you're watching a conversation and you're seeing a couple of people talk, look at the person that's talking and then take a moment and look at the people that they're talking to. If you can study their body language, you can actually predict and understand how well they're receiving. If they're talking about a topic that a person loves, you're going to see a very open and giving body language, a body language that says it's receiving, it's happy, it's understanding. There's some nods, but not just any nods. You got to really look at how people are doing it. For instance, if a person is receiving something, they're going to give you a nod like this, like, oh man, that's good. But if a person is listening to you and they're nodding like this, they're giving this feeling of like, yeah, I'm with you. But if you take a moment, you look at their eyebrows, they're kind of like frowning a little bit. And it's given this sense of like, I'm trying to understand you. I think what you're saying is correct, but for some strange reason, it's not clicking. This is why understanding body language is so important. The second thing I want to talk about is street smarts. Now, this concept is derived from the verse. You probably have heard it before. Jesus tells his disciples to be as innocent as doves, but wise as serpents. Basically, what he's saying is be on your P's and Q's. Be aware of what's happening in front of you when you go out into the streets. But also, street smarts means that you understand the language of the people that you're communicating to. You know, kind of not just like, the big topic, like phrases or slang words. That's not what this is. This is really understanding the cadence, the tone. Those things give more communication than actually what people are saying with their words. You're understanding how people want things delivered to them and how they love to give. This helps you speak the language of the people. You ever find yourself in a situation where you're talking to some people and you have absolutely no idea what they're talking about, but you kind of start to do the same little repeated phrase where you're just like, for me, it's sports. I'm not a sports guy. I don't really follow sports or keep up with sports. And whenever I find myself in a conversation when I'm talking about sports, first of all, I never really initiate these conversations, but more than often I find myself in them. I always people and I'm like, I always say things like this where I'm like, hey, how was the game? And oh, that's crazy. I'll say things like, oh man, that's wild. What I'm saying is I'm just agreeing with whatever is taking place in the conversation beforehand. I'm just using my street smarts to have a conversation with them without even really knowing what they're talking about. Now, for some people, I know you might think like, bro, that's a little bit manipulative. It's actually just me using a strategy so that I can understand them. And part of street smarts is not you just knowing what to say, but it's knowing what they're saying. It's the ability to engage in conversation and learn from the conversation. Most communicators fail because they think they need to know how to speak to them. But what's more important than knowing how to speak to people is knowing how to learn from people. Learning how they speak is super important. So you got to know the language of the streets. You got to know the language of the environment that you're in. You got to understand the do's and the don'ts. And so long as you're willing to learn and you're able to learn in real time, this will help you as a communicator. It will help you in your leadership skills when you're casting vision, but also when you're having a very tough, difficult conversation with a person that's one-on-one. The last thing I want to talk to you guys about is spiritual awareness. Being aware of what God is willing to do and wanting to do in the life of individuals that you are leading is so important. I say this all the time to my team and to my leaders. If somebody is asking me for advice, I will tell them before I even give them advice if I've prayed for them recently, so they know how to take that advice. Multiple times people will say, hey, I got this situation. What do you think about it? And if I've spent the time that week or that day to actually get on my knees and pray for them and ask God, hey, God, what are you wanting to do in this person and through this person? I will speak with that tone. And here's why. It's so important that as we communicate and lead and cast vision into the lives of the people that we have been appointed to do so, it's so important that we are aware as to where God is trying to take them. Now, obviously, no person knows the absolute will of God in another person's life. But if you are a shepherd, God will bring you in on a few of those very important secrets as to what he's trying to do in that person's life. For instance, if I have a person that's on my team and God has put this person on my team, to some degree, I am actually responsible to their level of growth. That means that God is bringing me in with how he would like to grow that individual. So when this happens or I have moments where I'm speaking to a person's life, I always want to check myself and I'm saying, have you prayed for this person recently? Are you aware of what God is trying to do spiritually in their life? And if you are not aware, then you need to lead accordingly, which means that you need to lead them in a way knowing that you actually don't know what God's trying to do in their life. Or you need to lead them in a way where you are reminding them like, hey, I have prayed for you and I do pray for you a lot and I was talking to God and I feel like these are maybe some of the decisions that you need to make or some of the actions that you need to take. Spiritual awareness it does not mean that you're very spiritual. It just means that you are aware of what the Spirit is wanting to do. You're registering and submitting to the will of the Holy Spirit in the middle of a room or in a person's life. This is everything. This is for big times when we're speaking in big crowds. This is for when we're having one-on-one discipleship with a person. This is when we're doing counseling, especially when we're doing counseling. I only counsel people that I feel like I'm praying for regularly, or I'm of God is letting me inside a little bit as to what they need to do. This is really important. With these three principles, you'll find that it's going to take a lot of practice. This is not something that you just wake up and you're like, I have the strongest EQ ever. This is something that you're going to have to put into action. You're going to have to do a lot of trial and error. Okay. So let's do a little bit of a recap. What is EQ? EQ is emotional intelligence. Today we talked about us being aware of the world around us. That's very different from us being aware of the world that's inside of us. Maybe in a different day or a different episode we can talk about that. But for today we broke it down into three principles: body language, street smarts, and spiritual awareness. Those are the three concepts that we need to be keeping in our everyday practice as leaders, as influencers, as people who have been appointed to lead other people. We want to be able to read the body language of individuals so that we can understand what's happening in the rooms that we're in. We want to be able to speak the language that these people speak, and we want to be capable of learning from them, understanding and being taught their tones and their cadence. That's so important. And lastly, we want to be aware of God's will in their life. What does God want to do with this person? What does God want to do with this conference? What does he want to do with this night that you're leading? Whatever it is that you're speaking into, you're leading, you're in part of, you need to ask God these questions. God, what are your desires for this person? What do you want to see changed in this person's life so that I, as the leader, can lead them to that change? I hope that this was really helpful for you guys. For any person that's leading at any capacity, let me remind you that we have all been called to disciple and be discipled. This is free game. Hope to see you guys another time.